Welcome to the Future is Freelance podcast, brought to you by Zolo, the operating system of the solo economy. Every week, we'll be serving up an audio cocktail of expert tips, inspired insights, and stories from the frontiers of freelancing to help you grow your borderless business to new heights and live life on your own terms. So kick back, grab a snack, and let's get started. Today's guest has a really unique lifestyle business in the purest futurist freelance sense, which she created for herself to fulfill an unmet need she uncovered through personal experience. Leah Ziliak is the Coliving Consultant, and she helps hospitality businesses around the world to work with the emerging wave of location-independent professionals who need places to stay in order to get things done. So she helps these businesses get the customer experience right from start to finish, or even before the start. And she often works with more traditional hospitality businesses to transform their offering and really serve the needs of this new kind of visitor, someone who has money to spend, a passion for engagement, and might well stick around for an extended stay. So Leah's story is a great example of how every potential entrepreneur can draw upon their own unique combination of skills and experiences and repurpose all that this has taught them to create something completely new, filling a gap they've experienced in their own life and riding a wave of opportunity to create something unique. So enjoy this conversation and everything it has to imply about the future of life, work, and seeing the world. And don't forget to share the future is freelance with your own fellow travelers. So hello, Leah. It's great to have you with us at The Future is Freelance. Welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Well, I would love to start with a little bit about your backstory because I know every little girl dreams of being a co-living consultant when they grow up and has a straight line career to that very destination. But I'm interested in knowing what that journey looked like for you. So how did you get to doing what you're doing right now?
Yeah, so I started out working in the music business, actually. I went to school for the music business in Nashville, and I worked with touring musicians for many years, and then in Austin as well. And I just got kind of tired of the music business world, and I wanted to do some traveling. So I started working on board cruise ships in hospitality and entertainment. And so I really loved the travel piece of that, but I knew that I wanted to travel outside of the Caribbean at some point. So I started doing some solo travels, but I really had a hard time meeting people and finding community that I had in the past. And so I had come across co-living at that point, and it just really resonated with me, being able to find community as you travel and still being able to do your own thing, but, hopping into these little hubs of community around the world. So yeah, I decided to kind of switch what I had done before and taking my experience in the hospitality and entertainment and event world and sort of transitioned into doing consulting work for co-living spaces. So that's the short story.
I'm sure there's lots more interesting twists and turns we can unpack as we go along. But let's talk a little bit more about co-living as a movement and as a relatively new phenomenon. How would you define it or describe it to someone unfamiliar with the idea, first of all?
Yeah, so co-living, in general, it's a form of shared living, but what we refer to it now is it's an elevated form of shared living. It's different than having a typical roommate situation. There are different types of co-living. So the type that I first experienced was the type that was meant for digital nomads. So it will usually be, a house of, 10 to 20 people or so, in which you have your own private space, but you share common areas and you have a co-working area. There are community events. It's very community driven in that way. But there are also more long-term residential co-living industry that's popping up all over the place. You might see high-rise spaces in London that are meant for long-term, residential stays, but there's still a community element. So it's a little bit different from a traditional shared living scenario in which it's more about the community and events, and it has a higher level of amenities, especially in the long-term residential spaces. You'll typically find a lot more than you would in a normal house share. So yeah, in general, it's shared living, but in a more elevated adult form.
Okay. So who is it for then? You mentioned digital nomads, but is this demographic, this target changing?
For sure. I mean, the digital nomad scene is one element of co-living, but it's a very small portion of the co-living industry as a whole.
Mm.
I think co-living as a whole is kind of normalizing living with a group of like-minded people well after your college years. I think after college, a lot of people kind of think they should go their own way and they live in their separate places, and that's fine if that's what you want to do. But co-living kind of gives you the opportunity to still be part of a community and live with like-minded people in a different way. So it's really opening the demographic to all kinds. I see, there's of course student housing has been a thing for a long time. That's some form of co-living, I guess. But there's co-living for different types of people, different people who have different interests, different age groups. It's there. It's all over the place as far as who it caters to. But it's for anybody who wants to be part of a community and have that shared living experience beyond what traditional shared living used to be.
That's interesting. Yes. So maybe for people who don't necessarily want to sort of pair off into a nuclear family and maybe want more flexibility and fluidity as we're coming into this changing time, that people are starting to be able to combine work and travel and all sorts of different things. I noticed you wrote something recently with the title Hybrid Hospitality, and that got me thinking about what an interesting term that was, and how just the way we travel for business and what we need in order to work when we're moving around has changed. That's an interesting trend. Where's that one going, do you think? Is this part of co-living, or is it's something more accessible for everybody who doesn't necessarily need a residential stay?
Exactly. Yes. And so, I mean, hybrid hospitality in general, it's kind of taking the hospitality industry, the hotel, restaurants, all those sorts of things, and they're taking bits of the co-living and co-working industries to kind of encourage longer stays. We have a lot of remote workers now, people who haven't traveled with their job before, who now have the opportunity to. So maybe they aren't interested in being a nomad, traveling full time, but they might want to go somewhere for a month, whereas before they might have just gone to a city for a couple of days. And your requirements for what you need if you're going to stay at a place for a month is much different than, if you're going to just go on vacation for a couple of days. So we're seeing lots of hotels that are incorporating co-working spaces, or at least upgrading their office areas, taking spaces that were underutilized before and turning them into more functional spaces for remote workers. Also integrating them into the community, into the neighborhood a little more, having more events, opportunities for people to socialize together as part of the co-living industry does. But also just, getting people to know not just the hotel itself, but, really get to experience life, in the city or wherever they are, and showcasing the different parts of their neighborhood, those sorts of things. So hybrid hospitality is definitely a big trend that's catering toward remote workers who want to see more of the world and, experience what remote travel life could be like on more of a shorter term.
Yeah. It's such an interesting trend, and it's great to see a move away from that sort of typical business travel back in the, dare we say it, the before days, where it was a case of, you could be anywhere in the world really if you just turn up, go to a conference hotel, spend your couple of days in an event and then leave, and you're not even sure where you've been. If remote work gives us the chance to immerse a little bit in the local culture, in the local scene. I tell you what, I'd love to pick your brains about this dreadful word bleisure that I keep coming across. What are we going to call it instead of that? Help, because
bleisure. I don't know that I've heard that one. Okay, so it's like business and leisure.
Yes, this idea of tagging on extra days to your business trip in order to spend a bit more time in the local community. We've got to come up with better branding for it than that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I hear workation most often. Where people that's a little bit, I guess, more pleasurable.
Yes, yeah. Okay,
a
let's
better
go with
word
that.
to say. Workation, yes. And there you'll see a lot of co-living workations and retreats and those sort of things popping up as well, because, if somebody who works from home and they're at their computer all day, they don't want to go to a foreign country and also work at home from the computer all day. They want to socialize and meet people. And it's really hard to do if you're by yourself. Or even if you're with your family or someone, it's hard to meet people who are in that same mindset, who want to socialize. And co-living just tends to draw in people who are interested in that, in community and, learning things. And, a lot of co-living is about, not only personal growth and relationships, but it's about professional growth as well. A lot of them have a lot of skill shares. They'll have events that are focused toward business and learning things and sharing things, your knowledge. And it's a really great way, not just to experience life in another country, but to learn new things and to give possibilities to your business or your life, however it is. But there are lots of benefits to living with a like-minded community.
Yeah, and such a great way for freelancers to grow and learn without compromising that solopreneur vision and having to sort of grow or scale or rent offices or anything like that, but to interact and experience new things. It's fantastic. It also makes total sense for the travel and hospitality industry too, to be repurposing places that have been probably underused in the last few years, trying to find new strands of business. And it makes total sense that digital nomads and remote workers and freelancers in general, they're an attractive, lucrative demographic. But clearly with your background in entertainment and hospitality, you're very aware of the differences between holiday travel and the kind of things that people need to build in order to work for that versus this new wave of people who need co-living. And that's where you've made your unique niche. So what do people get right? Yep. What do people get wrong? And what do you see changing?
Yeah, I see, especially in the nomad space, a lot of them are family run or very independently owned, and those smaller spaces do community really, really well. They know how to make people feel at home right away, and that part is really solid. You can form these lifelong relationships very, very quickly in these types of spaces, which I love. But the larger spaces are really great with hospitality. They're good at what they do because they've done it in that form and so for so long. But they struggle a little bit with the community piece, whereas the smaller ones might struggle with hospitality best practices and how to scale and all those sorts of things. It's kind of the opposite with the large spaces versus the small. So they each have their own kind of struggles. I think the larger you get, the harder it is to form genuine community, and you need to do it on smaller scales and kind of split people up into smaller groups in order to really form these authentic relationships. So they each have their struggles depending on their size and their demographic. But
yeah, okay. Well, it's great to see that there's a diversity of experiences coming into the space and different kinds of experiences on offer. So how do you help then? If somebody is thinking, maybe I've got a space, it could be used for a co-living, but I don't really know where to start. Maybe it was a hotel or something before. What sort of journey would you take them on?
Yeah, so my focus is on the customer experience part of things. So I help them design their community experience from start to finish. So we will do, usually I work with spaces that are already up and running and just need some help, or they're looking to transition from one form into co-living. But we take a look at their entire customer journey from start to finish. So looking at their onboarding process, how can they make their communication more effective? How can it be more community driven? Because I think that community isn't just something that forms whenever people arrive at the space. It happens, from the moment, from your branding, from the moment that you speak to them the first time, setting expectations and showing them what the experience is like, those sorts of things. So looking through all of their communication, is it effective? Are they communicating in the right way? Also looking at their event structure. Are they doing it in a way that's long-term? I think a lot of spaces tend to just host events. And that isn't great for community building because you want your community involved in building the community itself. And that's a whole other thing, shifting from, the top-down mentality that hotels are used to, putting out an event and hoping people come versus, the bottom-up strategy of co-living, which is, really building community and getting them involved in, doing community-led events and those sorts of things. So helping them with those pieces, and also, off to offboarding and how can you connect your community after they leave and as they're leaving and all these sorts of things. So just the entire customer experience for co-living.
So it's very much centered around that user journey of the person coming to spend that time, which may be probably measured in weeks or months, even within the co-living. What sort of work do you do with the local communities in those environments? I'm wondering, beyond the co-living institutions themselves, is there much that you can do as a consultant to strengthen those links? So if I were visiting a co-living, how would I get the most out of being in that particular country or village or wherever, as opposed to anywhere else in the world?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think a lot of spaces do this really well, in that usually at least the smaller spaces have somebody who's local, and so they already know,
Mm,
all of the great spaces in the neighborhood. That's one of the huge benefits to me is for co-living, is that it makes for just a soft landing anywhere you
yeah.
go, because not only do you have community as soon as you get there, which saves a ton of time. If you ever move to a city by yourself, how long it takes to
Yeah.
build your friend group, it's years, and co-living just lets you do that from day one. And also having locals usually around to show you the best places, the cool places that people go for dinner, and that they go, this happens on Wednesdays and everyone goes to do this or whatnot. It's really, really helpful and time saving to know these things right up front. So I
Yeah.
always advise, if they don't have anything set already, to have a neighborhood guide, have something sent out beforehand to your users, welcoming them, saying, showing them what the experience can be like and what the things are to do, especially with your branding, and showing what there is to do in the area, and connecting them. A lot of them will have events in which they're connecting with the local community or doing some sort of volunteer work, those sorts of things. So you can kind of connect to the community in a different way also.
I love that idea of volunteer work and digital
Mm-hmm.
nomads and other freelancers and travelers putting something back into those
Yeah.
local communities. Do you think, I mean, for the local communities with this new kind of traveler coming in, do you think it's different for them? Is it better for them than a tourist who just turns up, spends their money and goes away again? Do they get more out of the relationship, hopefully?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. It's really an interesting thing seeing some of these places where there were no travelers, and then all of a sudden the locals see all of these people coming. Why are they here? What are they doing?
Mm,
It's like, especially here. I'm in Bulgaria at the moment, at a small mountain town, and I was talking to a nomad who was Bulgarian, and she was talking about how she talks to the locals here, trying to explain to them who these people are, and why they're here, because they're confused. Where do all
yeah,
these people come from? Sometimes, especially the older generation, why would people come to this mountain town? But
yes.
yeah, I think in some areas it's easier to connect with the locals in general, but I think nomads for sure add much more value than a typical tourist, because they're spending a lot more money. They're
Mm,
staying a lot longer periods of time, and it's just a different experience. I forget the exact numbers of how many dollars or euros or pounds, whatever a typical nomad spends versus a traveler. So that's why you're seeing so many countries offering these digital nomad visas and incentives
yes.
to bring nomads in, because they're a high value demographic at the moment, and we're seeing a lot of things popping up because of that.
Yes, it's interesting, this wave of visas, and they all come with a pretty significant income condition attached to them, don't they?
Hmm.
Often
Yeah.
in comparison to local incomes as well. So I suppose
Yeah.
co-living is a very important part of making sure that flows into the community rather than into Airbnb, into chain
Yeah.
hotels and restaurants and things like that. So yeah, it's a very
Exactly.
exciting movement, and it's an exciting career. I mean, I love the fact that you've carved out something really unique for yourself based on the combination of your passions and experience. And that's something a lot of people who listen to The Future is Freelance are working towards or hoping for or on their own journey towards. So, I mean, can you share any insights that you've gleaned over the years, or what sort of advice would you give to entrepreneurs who are thinking, oh, I want to find my niche and my passion and make it into my career?
Yeah, I think I knew that I was passionate about co-living when I first experienced it for myself, but I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do as a career, and
Mm,
I had to kind of get clear on what my experiences were, and what those skill sets were, and how they did incorporate into what I wanted to do. I thought it'd be cool if I could go to a co-living space and show them how to make it better, enhance this part and do this part and all these sorts of things. But like, do I really know how to do that? And then when you start really getting clear on your skills and the things that you've done, I had spent, years, decades in the music industry and in the hospitality industry, and doing all these same sorts of things, but for a different group of people, for musicians
mm,
and for tourists and such. So I think a lot of people don't realize how much value they have in experience, especially when they
yeah.
want to do a career shift in what they already know. You're not starting from scratch. Already have years of experience doing something. You just have to kind of shift it into whatever it is that you're doing now.
Yes, and repurpose that from another
Mm.
angle, like with you in the music industry, you'd clearly learned so much about what makes a great event, what makes a great user experience, what makes something memorable happen for a group of people coming together for the first time. And you were able to bring that to a business setting. I mean, when did you first start to see this as a gap, or something that maybe needed to be better than it was, dare I say it?
Yeah, I mean, I probably, I guess right away, really. I had stayed at a couple co-living spaces, and I had noticed, especially the smaller ones, had kind of struggled with the hospitality piece. As I mentioned, they were really great with community, but there were some pieces lacking in the user journey that I thought could have been better. And so I just I did a test at a space that I had stayed at before, and kind of walked through what my, MVP, my minimum viable product would be, and kind of tested out what I would want to do. And then from there, just kind of made new iterations of my sessions, of my consulting, of my work, and just kind of change as I go along, because it is a newish industry, and I've completely made up this job. So there's no one else that's, to follow the path of. So you kind of learn as you go, and it works. So it takes a little bit longer than maybe if you had followed a path that already existed out there, but it works for me. And then I can kind of change and get better as I go along and figure out what works and what people need. And the longer you work in the industry, people have the same questions over and over again, the same pain points. And so you can kind of just shift your offering based off of what the pain points that people have.
Yeah, I love that there wasn't anybody out there to follow, because you were creating something completely new. But at the same time, you were clearly scratching an itch that you perceived yourself, that you could see things could be better. And obviously you were turning up somewhere and thinking, if only they'd done this, or if only they had that in place ahead of time, and so on. I imagine that you're getting really good results for the businesses that you're working for. What kind of transformations do they tend to perhaps not expect? I mean, obviously everybody wants revenue, they want numbers, they want people through the door, but is there any feedback that's been surprising or unexpected from the businesses that you've worked with?
Yeah, I think, from a user perspective, obviously doing these things well benefits the users in lots of different ways. But from a business perspective, there's so many benefits. And one, it's increased retention, especially when you're building community and having a place for people to come to and doing things really well. People tend to stay longer than they anticipated. So you're saving on those customer acquisition costs in the beginning, which is huge, because you want to keep happy customers are much easier to work with than unhappy customers. So it really benefits people to spend time on that user experience piece. But yeah, you're finding lots of word of mouth marketing also, in which, you do something really well and they tell people, especially in the digital nomad space, everyone talks about the great spaces that they've been, and they've talked about the terrible places that they've been. And so you want to be the place that people are talking about, because they already want to talk about it, especially on social media and such.
Yes.
But yeah, those are kind of the two main things, getting those retention rates up and getting people talking about your space, especially.
Yes, it's fascinating the way that the physical community experiences are now starting to interact with the digital ones, and that conversation is persisting beyond the coming together in any given location, particularly with this community. But I'm sure that's just leading the way for the rest of the world to follow, as digital nomads have so often done over the years, clearly. And so does your business tend to come by that word of mouth? Do people saying, I want you to do for us what you did for this place over here, please? Is that how it works? Are people sort of finding
a little
you out?
bit. Yeah, word of mouth, and also, through LinkedIn and Instagram, and just talking about co-living. It was, or at least when I started, it was a very, very small community of people, and we all had, everyone who's working in the co-living industry. There are a couple different co-living groups that meet up and have different events as industry professionals. So we all kind of know each other and already, and it's very easy to kind of be part of a community of community builders, which is really cool. It's starting to grow now, and of course the industry will continue to grow. But it's a tight knit group of people, and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger as the years go by. So
yeah, and it's lovely that it still feels small enough that it feels very mutually uplifting rather than competitive at the moment. And there are clearly different hotspots emerging around the world, but there's this sense that the growth of the movement is still so strong that it's just a case of making more room for more people to come in. And maybe one day there'll be a whole network of co-living consultants, following in your footsteps. I noticed you have another website as well, which is clearly sort of rating and reviewing different co-living experiences. And I suppose that's a natural product emerging from the differentiation that you're seeing. Do you try and visit all these places yourself, or are you looking for volunteers or user-generated content? How does it work? How are you going to create the ultimate directory of co-living?
Yeah. So the new project we just started is called Coliving Compass. So it's colivingcompass.com. But it's a platform specifically for the co-living spaces that are for digital nomads. So specifically for that demographic, because mostly when I tell people I'm a co-living consultant, that's the very first question that they ask is, what's the best co-living space? Where should I go? Where are they? And I really did not have a solid answer for anyone. There wasn't a great platform, I thought, out there. A lot of them kind of mix hostels into the group, and they mix shared living and just normal shared houses, roommates. And there wasn't one that specifically laid out the spaces that I'm talking about that are have a community manager, are meant for an older demographic, not the 20-something backpackers. And so we created a platform for that purpose. And right now, yes, some of them I've been to, some of them I haven't yet. I've just heard from friends that they're really great, and I've know the owners or know of the space that they're reputable. So each of them, I kind of have a checklist of things that they must have in order to be on the page, but we're going to keep growing. And yes, eventually I would like to get to all of them and have a personalized co-living consultant review of each, but we'll see.
Fantastic. Yeah. It sounds like a really unique resource that you're creating there, and something that, yes, I'm sure lots of people are looking for, especially if they're new to this idea, or they like the sound of it, but don't know where to start. I mean, I'm sure that you get asked that a lot. Where is the best place? But obviously, if everyone's got unique attributes, people need to make their own mind up based on their own priorities. So, growing the I think community.
Yeah, co-living has become such a buzzword these days that a lot of places are using the term when they aren't really what have the co-living ethos as far as community. It's just an easy thing to kind of a name tag to put up there. So it is really difficult to weed through the places that are great and the places that you should probably not spend your time on. So
there's a lot of that about. See, also digital nomad visas that are nothing to do with digital nomad.
Don't really make sense. Yes.
But let's jump on that buzzword and that flexible privileged income and try and get a bit of it. Yeah. I can see exactly where you're coming from. So I'm just wondering what this is all going to look like further down the line in the future, because it does feel to me like we're still at this pivot point where they've been through that experience of disconnecting their work from having to go to an office because they survived through lockdown and pandemics, but they were stuck in one place at that point. Now the world is unlocking, for better or for worse, unevenly, but people are mostly free now to go where they want to. Corporations are still arguing about whether people have to come and work in their empty offices or whether some of those will ultimately get repurposed for some kind of co-living experience. Maybe people will even get to live in city centres again. What do you think the future will look like? We can get the crystal ball out for 1 year or 5 years or whatever perspective you like. I just wonder what your vision is.
Yeah, I think, in terms of remote work, obviously it's going to keep growing and growing as more people realize its benefits. And I think more companies are sort of offering perks, whether it's, you can spend a month or two abroad or whatever it is. Some of them are offering, workation opportunities in which they send their whole staff to, Spain or something for a month as sort of a company retreat extended version where you're still working. So I think we're going to continue to see a lot of that. But as remote work continues to grow, I think people are going to be more conscious of where they spend their time, and being able to go to a different country and experience life for little bits of time, however you choose, is always going to be a desirable thing. So that's going to continue to grow, and the need for community for sure continues to grow. I think a lot of people have not experienced solo travel before. A lot of people who are working remotely and don't know how to meet people, and that is just a huge benefit of co-living, being able to hop into community. So we'll continue to see co-living as an option, co-living retreats, co-living workations in the long term, residential, as well as the shorter term nomad spaces. when it comes to residential co-living, we're seeing a huge uptick, especially it's the new real estate asset class that's kind of bubbling up in all the major cities, because it's a great way for, for people to live in cities again. It's an opportunity for people to be part of a community in a city, which is, it's really difficult. I've, lived in cities in the US before and not met anybody in the years that I've been there. After college, it's like the community piece is just gone. And so it's really difficult to make these genuine relationships. So co-living can offer, even if you don't want to travel, even if you don't work remotely, co-living can offer you an option to feel part of something in any place that you live. And so we're going to see that as an option, especially as the years go by, and definitely pushing the demographic age group up, and that it's not just something for 20 somethings. It's, something that I think will be available throughout all of your life. And, they're co-living for, people in their 70s and 80s. And it's, it's a different demographic for sure. But I think people don't want to be part. I mean, they don't stop wanting to be part of a community just because you get to a certain age. And I think that's how kind of society treated that after university, that this is what you do. You go be an adult now and you live by yourself. When that doesn't have to be the thing if you don't want to. And what's great about and another great thing about co-living, it's not just about the community, it's about flexibility. So usually they are furnished spaces. Usually you can offer short-term leases. Bills are all inclusive. There's housekeeping included. That's kind of the general point of most co-living spaces, whether they're residential or not. So people can choose to live in cities that they might not have been able to afford before or been too scared to. They might have always wanted to live in New York, but don't want to, sell all of their things and, go buy new furniture and like sign a 1-year lease and all these sorts of things that you have to do when you move to a new city. And with co-living, it's all done for you. So if you want to move to London for a month or 2 months or 3 months, you can do that. And it's very, very easy with a co-living experience versus just, actually moving to a new place. So it gives so many more opportunities for people to live in different parts of the world.
There's some really interesting trends there. I love the idea of being a way to kind of test maybe a longer term relocation. And that's clearly the way some of the digital nomad remote work visa kind of policies are going, as it being a route to longer term residency or even citizenship. But for the individual, that the power of being able to dip in and out, something more than an Airbnb, to really live and immerse. And I also like the thing you said a little bit earlier about the more corporate retreats and places that are now embracing the fully work from home or work remotely, if not completely work from anywhere policies, but wanting to do an offsite, bring people together for even if it's a fairly brief period, but to mix the work and the fun, the team building and relationship building experience. I suppose that's another niche that co-living can go into, is creating those kind of retreat spaces. I think, is it Salesforce that have bought a whole ranch or something just to host their own
sounds
staff?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, not every corporation is going to be able to afford to dedicate their own space, so they'll need co-livings in different cities and locations. So do you think that'll be more of a trend, that we'll see places taking over an entire, something the size of a boutique hotel or something, just to put their own team in for a month? Or...
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm seeing lots of companies that are catering to that, organizing retreats for co-working retreats for corporate businesses. So that's definitely a trend. There's also a lot of movable co-living, in which, people who maybe want to test out the nomad lifestyle, like there are different places where you can hop into a community for a month, and they might be in Colombia for a month, and then they'll be in wherever, moved somewhere else in South America for a month, and you can kind of hop in and join that community as you go. So that's another thing I think will continue to grow and give people more options to kind of test the waters. I think that's really what's happening right now is testing the waters. People don't know what it's like to work and travel, or, to travel, work outside of their home that they've, been used to being on their desk. And so there are lots of just kind of mini opportunities for people to try co-living, to try remote work in many different forms. And that's kind of popping up in so many different companies catering to this specific thing, that it's just going to be massive in the next few years for sure.
Such an exciting time and such an exciting journey to be part of. Where's home for you now, Leah? What do your short-term and long-term plans look like? I know you're in Bulgaria, where we caught up a couple of months ago at a Nomad Festival, but you're still there. So is that a permanent base now, or is it a bit more complicated than that?
No, it's not. It's not. This is my second summer that I've spent here. So I guess I like to slow travel in that I stay in a place as long as I'm allowed. So I'm staying here the full 3 months that they allow me here in Bulgaria. And then I'll move. So I'm taking a road trip up to Germany from here. And then I'll be speaking at a conference in the US, a travel blogger conference in October. So I'm going to head over there and then probably spend the winter in South America, I think is the plan. But
sounds like
it's always fluid.
Plan. Yes, so you're following the sun, which
try to, yep.
Avoiding the winter sounds like an excellent strategy and a good way to use those different visa dates and things that you're allowed. We've got your websites, which we will include in the show notes, and your social media. You mentioned this travel conference coming up. Any particular places that people should look out for you or catch up with you, or where can people best follow what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, always available on Instagram. It's Coliving Consultant are all my handles. So you can find me there. On LinkedIn, of course, or on my website, it has my email address, which is leah@colivingconsultant.com. So yeah, anywhere, any and everywhere.
Fantastic. Well, I think a lot of listeners for the Future of Freelance is going to take a lot out of this conversation, thinking about not only their own possibilities for where and how they live and work in the future, but also how to craft a unique entrepreneurial journey by finding out what you need in your own life, what services are not available, and simply going after it and crafting something that wasn't there that the world needed all along. So I think this has been really inspirational, Leah. Thanks so much for sharing and for joining us today on The Future is Freelance.
Thank you. Yes.
You've been listening to the Future is Freelance podcast, brought to you by Zolo.io, who offer compliance, taxation, invoicing, and admin solutions for fiercely independent solopreneurs across the globe. From simply getting paid to launching a full EU-based limited company, Zolo has you covered, thanks to Estonian e-residency and a superb suite of streamlined business software. If you enjoyed the show, please like, rate, and comment, and subscribe to our feed wherever you get your podcasts.